The review that sold you on your bike never met the mechanic who'll actually work on it. That first ride was real. The reviewer wasn't lying to you. They rode the bike hard, on a good road, on a good day, and they told you exactly what they felt in that moment. But one outlet decided to find out what came after that first ride. RevZilla kept a CFMOTO Ibex 450 as a long-term test bike, the same bike reviewers praised on day one, and put real miles on it the way an actual owner would. 18 months later, their own reviewer was standing at a service counter holding an invoice, no first ride ever warned anyone about, and one number buried on that invoice explains almost everything you're about to learn about owning a motorcycle. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that number was, what it proves about every review you've ever trusted, and how to go looking for it yourself before you ever sign anything. This isn't a lemon story, it's RevZilla's own long-term test of the CFMOTO Ibex 450, a bike reviewers genuinely liked on day one, tested by the same outlet that liked it. Even Cycle World has admitted this about its own format. A first ride is a controlled early impression. Useful, but never a complete verdict. It's not built to run long enough to see what a long-term test eventually would. So the real question here was never whether the first ride lied. It's what a single afternoon on a curated route simply hadn't lived long enough to find out yet, and what that gap in the format was quietly about to cost. That gap is the entire subject of this video. Not a takedown of any one reviewer, and not a claim that first rides are worthless. Just an honest look at where the format ceiling actually sits and what falls through the crack right above it. Think about what a press launch actually is. A handful of journalists, a curated route, a bike that gets handed back at the end of the day, looking almost exactly like it did that morning. It rolls off a truck freshly prepped, gets ridden for a few hours on roads someone else scouted in advance, and rolls back onto that same truck before dark. That format can tell you how a bike brakes, how it turns in, how the seat feels for an afternoon. It was never designed to tell you what happens at 3,000 miles, because at 3,000 miles the bike isn't a press bike anymore. It's just a bike, sitting in someone's garage, waiting on its owner to notice what the launch route never had time to reveal. RevZilla's Ibex wasn't handed back after a press loan on a curated route. It stayed in their fleet as a daily bike, commutes, weather, potholes, the kind of mileage no single-day press launch ever puts on a motorcycle before handing it back. By the time the odometer passed 4,000 miles, a little over 3,000 miles past the initial break-in service, the bike wasn't a press bike anymore in any way that mattered. It was just a bike, doing what an actual owner's bike does, revealing what the launch route never had time to show. That's when the first real bill showed up. The scheduled 3,000-mile service alone came to $697.99 before tax, and buried inside that number was one specific line that mattered more than any of it. 2 labor hours, $360, spent purely on removing and reinstalling the protective accessories bolted onto the bike just so the mechanic could reach the parts underneath them. Add a separate tire installation job on top of that same visit, and the full invoice climbed to $890.06. Owners bolt on skid plates and crash bars to protect their motorcycles. Nobody tells them the skid plate will cost labor time every single time the bike needs a wrench anywhere near it. That's the number from the very start of this video. Hold on to it, because it's going to come back before we're done. To be fair, this is one bike, one test, one specific set of accessories. It doesn't mean every Ibex 450 owner pays $890.06 at 4,000 miles. And it doesn't mean every accessory on every bike adds labor the same way. But it proves something no 5-star review ever can. This number simply does not exist on day one. It can't. The bike hasn't lived long enough yet for anyone to write it down. If you've never thought about a first ride this way before, that's exactly the blind spot this channel exists to close. Subscribe, because we are nowhere near done with this bike. Here's what should factor into every buyer's decision before they ever put a deposit down. Warranty length isn't hidden information. It's sitting right there on the spec sheet, next to horsepower and seat height in plain public view. Reviews mention it, usually in a single line near the bottom. They almost never weigh it the way they weigh horsepower or brakes, even though months down the road, it can matter more to your bank account than anything the bike does on a canyon road. If a buyer actually cross-shopped warranty terms the way they cross-shop seat comfort and ergonomics, here's what they'd find. A BMW motorcycle generally carries a 3-year, 36,000-mile factory warranty. The 2026 Honda Africa Twin carries 1 year, unlimited mileage. Same category of bike. Same kind of buyer walking into the dealership with the same set of expectations. A completely different safety net waiting for them if something breaks in year 2. A longer warranty doesn't prove a bike is built better. A shorter one doesn't prove it's built worse. That's not what warranty length is even measuring. It's measuring how much risk the manufacturer is willing to carry on your behalf, which is a financial decision wearing an engineering costume. And that's exactly the kind of detail a one-day test ride was never built to explain, because it has nothing to do with how a bike leans into a corner. It has everything to do with what happens to your wallet 18 months from now, long after the reviewer has moved on to the next launch, the next embargo, the next bike waiting on the same truck. So if warranty terms swing that hard between two competing brands, here's the harder question worth sitting with. Do they swing just as hard inside the very same brand? Stay with Honda for a moment, because this is where it gets genuinely strange. The Africa Twin, 1 year, unlimited mileage. The Goldwing, from that exact same manufacturer, wearing that exact same badge on the tank, 3 years, unlimited mileage. If a buyer walked into that showroom assuming it's a Honda, so the coverage is the coverage, they'd be wrong before they even threw a leg over the bike. Brand loyalty tells you something real. It just doesn't tell you everything you need to know. The actual skill here was never picking the right badge on the tank. It was reading the paperwork for the exact model sitting in front of you, on that specific day, in that specific model year. Buyers cross-shopping a bike like the Ibex often talk themselves out of a Ducati Monster before they have even ridden one, purely on reputation. Everyone's heard the old joke, Ducatis live at the dealership, and owning one means being on a first-name basis with the service department, budgeting for it the way you would budget for a car payment. Here's what the numbers actually say instead. The Monster lists a 9,000-mile, 24-month general service interval, an 18,000-mile valve clearance interval, and a 24-month unlimited mileage warranty. On paper, that is a modern competitive schedule, not the punishment the stereotype promises, and not far off from what the Ibex itself would eventually ask of its owner. But notice exactly what that schedule does not tell you. It tells you when the bike needs attention. It says absolutely nothing about what that visit is going to cost when you actually get there. Interval and invoice are two completely different documents, and only one of them ever makes it into a review. The same blind spot that produced an $890 invoice on the Ibex is quietly sitting inside the Monster 2, just wearing a different reputation and a cleaner looking spec sheet. Line those three bikes up and a pattern starts to show itself. The Ibex hid its real cost inside an accessory labor charge. The Africa Twin and the Goldwing hid theirs inside two warranty documents wearing the same badge. The Monster hid its behind a clean, modern-looking service schedule that never once mentions a dollar figure. Three completely different motorcycles, three completely different disguises, and the same underlying problem every time. The number that actually matters to an owner is never the number sitting on the spec sheet. There's one more thing the Ibex had that a first ride only ever gets 15 minutes with. It's electronics. Ride-by-wire throttle, switchable ABS, switchable traction control. A reviewer can fully judge how all of that feels on a demo loop in a single afternoon, smooth power delivery, predictable safety nets, systems that actually change the character of the bike. What they can't judge in that afternoon is how that same system behaves 5 years from now, what it costs the day a sensor finally fails, or whether the local dealer even stocks the part when it does. More technology doesn't automatically mean more failures down the road. It doesn't automatically mean fewer either. What it reliably does mean is more systems that likely require a dealer's diagnostic tool instead of an owner's own socket set in their own garage. That's not a verdict on reliability, it's a question about dependence. And it's one more thing a glowing first ride was never in a position to answer, because the reviewer handed the bike back long before any of it could go wrong, well before any sensor had the chance to fail, or any dealer had the chance to run out of stock on the part. The invoice wasn't even the only thing that surfaced once the bike had real time on the clock. The same long-term Ibex 450 test that produced that $890.06 bill also caught a handful of smaller things no first ride ever could. The protection accessories that drove up labor cost also made basic maintenance access more of a hassle in general. The seat turned uncomfortable after about an hour in the saddle, not on day one, but on the kind of ride an actual commuter takes every week. The bike showed some heated grip compatibility limitations, and its tall windscreen had a habit of gradually lowering itself in gusty conditions, on its own, mid-ride. None of those four things proved that every Ibex 450 has an uncomfortable seat or a windscreen that can't hold its position. One long-term test on one motorcycle can't carry that kind of weight, and it shouldn't be asked to. But every single one of those details shares the same fingerprint as the invoice. They only exist because somebody put real weeks on the bike, in real weather, on a real commute. Not one of them could have shown up in a first ride, because a first ride never gets far enough into the story to find them. It ends before the story does. Here's the part that actually matters most in all of this. None of it means anyone got played. A reviewer can't publish reliability data that doesn't exist yet. Nobody can hand a buyer a 5-year cost of ownership report on a motorcycle that came out 6 weeks ago. The format has a ceiling, and that ceiling was never dishonesty. It was simply time. Time the bike hadn't had yet, and time the first ride reviewer never got to spend with it. That same ceiling shows up in a place a lot of owners misread completely: the recall notice. A recall confirms one specific safety issue got identified and addressed. That's all it confirms. It says nothing about a bike's overall reliability, and it was never meant to be read as a verdict on the whole model, any more than a single bad service invoice would be. It's easy to see a recall letter show up in the mailbox and assume the worst, because reviews spent months training you to expect a verdict on every page, and a recall looks like one, even when it isn't. Reading a recall correctly takes the same skill as reading a warranty correctly. Look at exactly what the document says, not at what your gut assumes it says. Which brings us back to that $360 labor charge from the very beginning of this video. It was never really just about a skid plate. It was proof that ownership cost doesn't live in the sticker price, or the spec sheet, or even a published service interval. It lives in access, what it actually takes to reach the parts, what it takes to get the parts at all, what it takes to keep the bike running the way you rode it home on day one. Insurance premiums, resale value, dealer labor rates, tire wear, the cost of the accessories you'll inevitably want to add, none of that folds down into one tidy number that applies to every rider, on every bike, in every zip code. Your insurance premium depends on where you live and what your record looks like, not just what bike you ride. Resale value depends on the model, the year, and whatever the market happens to be doing the week you decide to sell. Dealer labor rates depend on the dealership. None of these numbers are fixed, and none of them show up in a first ride, because a first ride was never asking any of these questions in the first place. That invoice for $890.06 was specific to that bike, that dealership, that set of accessories. Yours will look different, on a different bike, in a different year, at a different dealership. But the shape of the problem is identical for every single rider who has ever trusted a 5-star review to answer what was always a 5-year question. Before this video, you probably believed a great review meant a safe purchase. That if enough experienced reviewers liked a bike, the hard part of ownership had already been handled for you, and all that was left was picking a color. Most buyers believe exactly that. And the review isn't wrong, it just isn't finished, because it was never built to see the invoice waiting at 4,000 miles, the warranty clock quietly running out at year 1 instead of year 3, or the dealer visit sitting on the other side of the sale. None of that makes the review dishonest. It just makes it incomplete, in the one place buyers need it most. The best reviewed motorcycle on the market can still be the wrong motorcycle for you to own. Not because anyone lied to you, because the review, by design, was only ever half the story, and the other half was always going to be written by the mechanic, the insurance agent, and the calendar, not the reviewer. A review is where your research starts. It was never supposed to be where it ends. If this changed how you will watch your next review, subscribe, because this channel exists to cover the other half of the story nobody else is filming.